So Season of Discovery is now entering its endgame, where people are farming Prebis, getting into the different heat levels of Molten Core, and there's plenty to look forwards to in the future in the way of raiding and PvP. And as much as the recent seasonal server is ongoing, conversations about Classic Plus have been picking up a little bit once again. Just as of late, we've had a few interviews which have dropped, which have really said a bit more from Blizzard's end about what they're doing in Season of Discovery, and more importantly, why. I just want to play you a real quick clip from one of them here.
I think the community just needs to reflect on what we're doing as a team and try to think about why we're doing it. Like, why do we have an experimental seasonal server like Season of Discovery? Without saying anything, I think people can maybe infer a lot of stuff from.
I'll post all the recent interviews below as well if you wanted to check any of them out. Definitely worth a listen to whilst you're grinding away. Also, we've supposedly had surveys go out recently too, which I covered not so long ago, and whilst the authenticity of them was a bit dubious, it's just interesting that both of these things have happened relatively close together. And Season of Discovery itself is going to go on for quite a while longer by the appearance of it. A while ago, Blizzard said BWL would be a few weeks after Molten Core. That doesn't appear to be the case anymore. I reckon they're going to give Molten Core a decent few months, if anything, and give it some time to breathe, in their own words. But ultimately, as we always do, the conversation keeps coming back around to what if we did have a version of Classic which was a bit more permanent? What if we eventually had Classic Plus? And given these recent events, things are looking pretty interesting. As fine as Season of Discovery has been for a standalone experience and to really push the boat out on extreme changes, it's fine for what it is if you enjoy it, but I think it hasn't met a lot of people's expectations in what a permanent server would end up looking like. So today I want to take a bit of an attempt at going over some things which I think in any case should be in Classic Plus, and as split as the community is on many topics, these will be the areas of the game which I think would more or less have to happen for the server to make sense long term. So with all that said, let's make a start. The first thing I'd want to see for Classic Plus is a standalone server, and not something which is sharing a codebase with all the different versions of Classic, from Hardcore to Era and Season of Discovery. Simply put, something breaks in another version of Classic every single time there is a big update on Season of Discovery, and whether that's an annoyance in Classic Era that's taking away from the original experience, or something which could get your level 60 Hardcore character killed, which is a bit more serious. Nobody wants this, and it doesn't benefit anyone. Well, from a player point of view, it doesn't benefit us at least. From Blizzard's point of view, I imagine it's cutting down on a lot of potential work. Between the various different versions of the game, they're already maintaining a lot, I would imagine. But if Classic Plus were to happen on an ongoing basis and be its own standalone thing, it does need a standalone server. The next thing I'd want to see would be, frankly, a more dedicated team than what it appears we have at the moment. If Season of Discovery wasn't good enough proof to put more effort into Classic Plus long term, I truly don't know what will be. When SOD first came out, it was kind of advertised as a bit of Classic Plus and we're having a go at this, and it saw an absolutely insane amount of people come back to the game from all versions of World of Warcraft and outside of WoW indeed. And with the Classic team at the moment, I understand Season of Discovery is seasonal, it's in the nature, but you can feel as though they're having to hop back and forth between these different projects, namely Cataclysm and Season of Discovery at the moment. And at different points in time, both Season of Discovery and Cataclysm have felt somewhat neglected, and though they're missing the attention that they deserved. And then priorities shift and updates happen all at once. It's kind of like this. Imagine you've got a shop with only a few members of staff which handle everything. They do the tills, restocking, organization, paperwork, the lot. And then you do some new promotion, which is so popular, it brings in all these new customers. And suddenly people are queuing at the tills at the front of the shop, and you're bringing staff members off of other things for this new demand. But when you take all the staff and move them to the tills, other things start to fall behind. Restocking wasn't correct, so you didn't order enough of something in, shelves start to go empty, and you've begun to neglect things which are important because there's something else that's cropped up which is urgent, and you have to do it now. So at the end of the day, the customers at the front have to be dealt with, but things in the background are falling apart, and you can't ignore something important for too long because it's just that. Important. And this is kind of how it's felt for at least me as a player between Season of Discovery and Cataclysm. It feels as though they're being pulled from one urgent task to the next without always being able to meet the demand of the things which are important. This is why we've gone from regular patch balances in Season of Discovery to, well, just wait for the next patch and then we'll try and do a big update. Or why for a long time after Cataclysm release the talent screen was still broken. Or why you could see other realms in the LFG. Or why your character just wasn't centered when you inspected someone. These are small things, but they are important, and when they're broken, they're very noticeably broken. And I know people are going to bring up it's not financially successful enough, and compared to retail, which has way more microtransactions, I imagine it wouldn't be. But I reckon there's more than enough interest to come from a Classic Plus project too. Even in the classic version of WoW we have right now, Cataclysm, while there's been character boosts and toys and mounts and services since the Burning Crusade and the WoW token since mid-Wrath of the Lich King. On top of that, each new expansion they're selling various packs so they can monetize it a bit more too. A lot of the same framework which exists in retail is in the game now. There's less stuff to buy and less stuff on the shop, and less players despite whatever you may think, but still it's there. And Season of Discovery when it dropped was immensely popular. In fact, Blizzard released a video going over the numbers 2 weeks into Season of Discovery. Blizzard pretty much never gives us the numbers, so you can tell they must have been really happy about how this thing was going. 2 weeks in, there was some 4.5 million characters created, nearly 3.9 million PvP deaths in Ashenvale, and 460,000 level 25 characters. Season of Discovery at its outset easily had several 100,000 people actively subbed to the game. Maybe not entirely because of Season of Discovery, but at least there were a lot of people willing to give it a chance and invest some time into it. But I guess what I'm saying here is that I think this project does have the ability to make money, and that moving forward I'd like to see a more dedicated team to it should Classic Plus happen. Next thing is that it really can't just be Blizzard guessing what is good and bad and what will be well received from updates. I think Season of Discovery at this point has probably not done too many favors for people's belief that Blizzard can pull off good class balancing, for example, but there does need to be some degree of communication on changes and updates. Here comes the inevitable old school RuneScape segue, I'm sure you knew it was coming. But for their larger updates, what they'll do is a blog in advance of any voting. This blog will basically say, here's what we want to do, here's some of the artwork and how it will look, these are the ideas we want to implement mechanically, these are the rewards, these are the stats they have. They're taking all this stuff from the update, putting it on a page and just allowing players to read it through. Following that, they'll have their votes where 70% or more have to be in favor. Now for WoW specifically, I'm kind of doubtful we'll get to the stage where we're voting on things, and that's because in RuneScape there's not really this split between the player base as there is in WoW. Everyone's character can do the same thing, there's no class delineations, and there's no factions either, so they're not split in that regard. In World of Warcraft, imagine Blizzard say, okay, well, clearly warriors are too good, we're going to nerf them. And then they put out a poll saying, here's how we're going to nerf them. Well, every warrior player is going to say no, but every non-warrior player is probably going to say yes. Or for example, imagine they say, we think Alliance racials are too weak in PvP, we're going to give human every man for themselves. Every Alliance player, oh, that's an easy yes. Every Horde player, no. And that's kind of the problem with World of Warcraft and a voting system. We are split between our own players. We're split by classes and we're split by factions. So I think people are going to vote in their own interests quite a lot more than they would, as opposed to something which they think would be beneficial long term. However, if there was some kind of blog system where they're really outlining everything that's planned in the patch, and then we're able to collect feedback off of that, I think that would be a good step at least. And I guess there'll be a subset of players who are saying you're ruining the patch by releasing everything in advance and telling us everything there's going to be, but the alternative is, well, what they've been doing for the past 20 or so years. So really, if you want it to change, you have to do things differently. In any event, there will need to be some communication for changes so they can get a feel feel of what's going to work and why. Again, it can't just be Blizzard guessing what's going to be good or bad. Next is new original content. Well, yes, obviously Classic Plus is going to need new content, duh, but it's worth talking about. So far, both seasonal servers have had more of an endgame focus. Seasonal Mastery was mainly about updating raids to make them a bit more challenging, and Season of Discovery has had these level brackets where you're exploring new ways to play your class, but you're also exploring new pit stops for the endgame levels, 25, 40, 50, and now 60. But vanilla typically focuses a bit less on the endgame than other versions of World of Warcraft. So to this end, I'd expect to see different things such as expanded content, dungeons pre-60, new wings in dungeons or raids, and just building on the existing world. I think that's the key here. We're not looking to replace stuff which exists with new stuff, we're trying to build up what we already have. The framework is strong, and in some places there's just quite a lot of nothing, so if we added to them, I think that that would be very good. I also think when it comes to new content, controversial as this may be, it wouldn't be bad to put some stuff in the game, especially at endgame, that could be focused on more by the solo player than explicitly it always being group content. There is a ton of group content at endgame in vanilla at the moment, and I know people say it's a massively multiplayer game as though it's a sin to play solo and we can't do that in vanilla, but just a few more avenues of play for somebody who's a bit more restricted on time towards endgame I don't think would go amiss. At the end of the day, you can get from 1 to 60 and you can do group content all the way if you want. You don't have to be solo, you don't have to be part of a group, you can do whichever one you want, and then it gets to level cap and the game says, okay, now do everything as a group. Not saying get full raid gear from being solo or anything, but maybe just some more avenues of gameplay in one way or another. I know this is pretty vague, but I'm just throwing it out there. Things such as, for example, the Mage Tower. I don't know if you've seen the Warrior Challenge in Silithus where they have to find the Wandering Swordsman and then they fight this guy atop a giant pillar. That is pretty much the Mage Tower in vanilla, and I think it's a brilliant idea. I'd love to see more of that for other classes. There's the Brawlers Guild from Mists of Pandaria. I'm a huge fan of the Brawlers Guild, and I think it would fit very well thematically into vanilla. There'd be nothing like watching that one guy from your guild who just got a BIS item, fail some stupid mechanic and get pecked in the eye by a penguin and get one shot. I'd love to see that. You could potentially have new class quests, new reputations for items, new profession updates, and so on and so forth. Group content in MMOs is fantastic, but don't forget about the guy who doesn't always have time to do that. Next is updating certain systems. These are going to probably receive a bit more of a mixed review, I would bet. First of all, 42-yard nameplates and instant mail. At least instant mail between your own characters if possible, similar to how it was in TBC. I don't think that's breaking the game too much, and it would add a bit of a layer of convenience. As for the nameplates thing, I mean, this is coming from a guy who typically plays classes with damage over time abilities, and if I use a dot on an enemy that's more than about 25 yards away, I have to use an add-on to actually see how long is left on that dot, and it's just kind of scuffed, to be honest. Possible updates to how stats work to move to a rating system as it was in TBC. So this will probably be pretty controversial. With how stats work on items in vanilla, they're very item defining. They moved to a rating system in TBC so they could put more incremental bonuses on items. In vanilla, an item either has 1% crit or 2% crit. Some items with 2% hit are BIS for pretty much the entire game because 2% hit is just such a big deal. How is it when we're going to get to new content that are we going to start putting 3% hit on items? 4%? That's crazy. That's just such a big number to throw in one go. Maybe full percentages on items need to be dialed back in general, or maybe the rating system would make sense long term. Updating the UI in certain places, such as when you're looking for a group. I'm not a fan of just having to spam in a chat channel or try and open the chat channel out so I can read it, and then installing the LFG bulletin board so I can parcel that data into something which I can understand. I think the default version vanilla has without add-ons is honestly very poor, and the bulletin board add-on is good, but the base game shouldn't really require an add-on to do something which is as simple and core to the game as putting a group together. Not talking about the LFG insofar as it being something which teleports you to the dungeon or forms your group for you, but just something where you can see who is looking for what and what they need and so on. The ranking rework to be carried forward from Season of Discovery. Decay is just not a fun mechanic, so let's keep that out of the game, please. NPCs marked as dishonorable kills to just be made immune from damage instead. Dishonorable kills just don't work anymore. I get why they put them in the game, they didn't want high-level characters running around and griefing starting zone mobs, but dishonorable kills as they work at the moment actively disincentivize PvP. You could be in a raid in your ranking and somebody accidentally kills an NPC which awards a dishonorable kill, and that's just messed up your ranking for the week. Equally, people when they're ranking don't want to go and invade other capital cities. They'll actively avoid doing large-scale PvP just because of the risk of dishonorable kills. I think they were a good idea at the time. It makes sense why they've done this. We need a better solution. I think the faction balance system from Season of Discovery on PvP servers and potentially some kind of warning before a new player creates a character there would also go a long way. If you can keep PvP servers 50-50 on faction balance, that should be the exact environment people opting into that should want. There's still issues on these servers, however, due to layering and one faction taking one layer and another taking another. I don't know whether there's a proper solution to that issue, but in theory what they've done in Season of Discovery is a positive. Next up would be some level of class balancing. Again, after Season of Discovery, people may not exactly want to hear this, but the way we played Classic as an MMO so far is not normal, if I'm honest. Online games don't release once and then never balance anything ever. It's been this way because we've been playing these expansions on the final patch, and we've mentally signed up for nothing to change. It's as though if you want to play a class that does a lot of damage, you should play this. If you want to play a healer, you should play this, and so on and so forth. If this is an ongoing game, it's not going to release and never have any balance ever. On top of that, I think you could start off with just minor tweaks to common grievances, such as prop pally having no taunt, hybrid classes going and so on. Then again, maybe you could take some of the bigger successes from Season of Discovery and begin to implement them. For example, I think the changes they made to tank where they gain attack or spell power from defense that goes above their cap is actually a really smart idea and puts a lot more value into defense as a stat, which typically a tank should be valuing. But yeah, long term, if this is an ongoing thing in an MMO that's receiving updates, there's gonna be class balancing. That's the way things are. And finally, it's going to be about compromising and communicating. You know what they say about compromises? If no one's happy, it's a good compromise. Whatever Blizzard do, should they do this Classic Plus thing, there's going to be people who will love it and people who will hate it. And that's going to have to be okay. So communications and those blog posts that I mentioned earlier potentially about what their plans are in the future. And ultimately, Blizzard need to decide who they're making the game for, rather than just trying to please everybody. There are a lot of different versions of Classic on offer at the moment, and sometimes I legitimately think the correct thing to say would be go play Classic Era instead if these are too many changes. Some people will find change to be good, some will be bad, but ultimately if it's going to grow into its own thing, it's going to be different, and that won't be for everyone. That's pretty much everything I've got today for the points which I think would have to be in consideration for Classic Plus. I know some people are going to disagree or agree. Hey, that's kind of the nature of the type of video that I'm making here, but let me know your thoughts on everything. Are there any other absolutely key points that you would bring up for Classic Plus? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all on the next one very soon.